December 18, 2011, a quiet Sunday afternoon in St. Louis County, Missouri. For most families, it was an ordinary day. People were finishing errands, watching television, preparing for the week ahead. Nothing seemed unusual. Nothing seemed out of place. But sometime around 3 p.m., a 23-year-old woman climbed into her black SUV and drove away from her family's home. At first, nobody thought twice about it. There was no argument, no dramatic goodbye, no sign of distress. She simply left, and then she vanished. Her name was Phoenix Coldon. By all accounts, she had a promising future. She came from a loving family. She was educated, talented, and deeply involved in music. Friends described her as intelligent and creative. Her parents believed they knew almost everything about her life. But as investigators would soon discover, there may have been parts of Phoenix that nobody truly understood. Hours after she left home, concern began to grow. Calls went unanswered. Messages were ignored. Phoenix wasn't where she was supposed to be, and for those who knew her best, that immediately felt wrong. Because disappearing without warning was completely out of character. She was close to her family. She maintained regular contact. She wasn't known for taking spontaneous trips. Yet as the evening turned into night, there was still no sign of her. Then, just days later, the mystery deepened. Phoenix's black Chevrolet Blazer was discovered abandoned in East St. Louis, Illinois. The vehicle appeared intact. There was no obvious evidence of a crash, no indication of a struggle, no explanation for why it had been left there. Most importantly, Phoenix herself was nowhere to be found. For investigators, finding the vehicle should have been a breakthrough. Instead, it raised even more questions. How had it gotten there? Why was it abandoned? And where had Phoenix gone afterward? At first glance, the case seemed straightforward. A young woman leaves home. Her vehicle is found. Investigators follow the evidence. But this case would prove to be anything but straightforward. Because the deeper detectives looked into Phoenix's life, the more contradictions they discovered. Friends described one version of Phoenix. Her family described another. And somewhere between those two versions lay a mystery that remains unsolved to this day. Phoenix Coldon was born into a family that valued education, discipline, and achievement. Her parents worked hard to provide opportunities for their children. By all accounts, they cared deeply about her future. Phoenix was talented from an early age. She excelled academically. She played the violin. She participated in church activities. And she appeared to be moving toward a successful adulthood. To outsiders, her life looked stable, predictable, secure. But investigators would later learn that appearances can be misleading. As friends came forward, they began describing aspects of Phoenix's life that her family either didn't know about or didn't fully understand. There were reports that she had developed friendships her parents were unfamiliar with. There were claims she had been exploring a more independent lifestyle. Some suggested she had dreams and ambitions that extended beyond the expectations placed upon her. None of these details seemed alarming on their own, but together they painted a more complicated picture, a picture that raised an unsettling possibility. Was Phoenix living a second life? And if she was, could that hidden life somehow explain her disappearance? At first, investigators couldn't answer that question. They focused instead on the timeline, the last confirmed moments before Phoenix vanished, the final known movements that might reveal what happened after she left home that afternoon. Because somewhere between her family's driveway and the abandoned SUV in East St. Louis, something changed, something happened. And whatever happened in those missing hours would become the key to the entire mystery. The search for Phoenix Coldon was about to begin. When investigators officially began examining the case, they faced a problem almost immediately. There were very few confirmed facts. Phoenix had left home. Her vehicle had later been discovered. And somewhere between those 2 points, the trail disappeared. Detectives started where most investigations begin, the abandoned SUV. The black Chevrolet Blazer had been found in East St. Louis, Illinois, a location several miles away from Phoenix's family home. At first glance, the vehicle appeared ordinary. There were no obvious signs of damage, no indication of a violent incident. no evidence suggesting why it had been left behind. To investigators, that absence of evidence was almost as troubling as evidence itself, because abandoned vehicles often tell a story. This one didn't. There was no clear explanation for how Phoenix arrived at that location. No witnesses who could confidently describe seeing her there. No surveillance footage that provided definitive answers. Just a vehicle. Parked. Silent. Waiting. As forensic examinations continued, investigators hoped physical evidence inside the SUV would point them toward a suspect or a destination, but the results were frustratingly limited. Nothing immediately explained Phoenix's disappearance. Nothing revealed where she had gone after leaving the vehicle. And nothing answered the most important question. Was Phoenix even the person who parked it there? As days passed, detectives shifted their focus toward Phoenix herself. The goal was simple: reconstruct her life, identify her routines, understand her relationships, and determine whether anyone had reason to harm her. But what investigators discovered complicated the case even further. Because the more people they interviewed, the more conflicting information emerged. Family members described Phoenix as sheltered and cautious, a young woman who lived under strict rules and maintained close ties with her parents. Friends, however, sometimes described a different person, someone who wanted more independence, someone who occasionally kept parts of her life private, someone who may have been navigating a difficult balance between personal freedom and family expectations. Neither version necessarily contradicted the other. In fact, both could be true, but together they created uncertainty. And uncertainty is often where mysteries thrive. Then investigators uncovered something else. Reports began surfacing that Phoenix had recently formed friendships her parents knew little about. There were claims she had been spending time with people outside her usual social circles. Some reports suggested she had discussed moving away. Others suggested she was exploring opportunities that would give her greater independence. None of this proved she intended to disappear, but it raised possibilities investigators could not ignore. Was Phoenix planning a major life change? Had she become involved with someone unknown to her family? Or was all of this unrelated to her disappearance? The answers remained elusive. Meanwhile, public interest in the case continued growing. News coverage expanded. Missing person flyers circulated. Community members joined search efforts. Yet, despite increasing attention, no credible sightings emerged. Days became weeks. Weeks became months. Still nothing. And this is where the case takes an especially troubling turn. Because unlike many missing person investigations, there was no clear indication of what type of case detectives were dealing with. Was it a voluntary disappearance? A crime? An accident? Investigators couldn't say. Each possibility seemed plausible, and each possibility contained serious flaws. The voluntary disappearance theory gained attention early. Supporters argued that Phoenix may have chosen to leave her previous life behind. They pointed to reports suggesting she wanted greater independence. They noted the absence of obvious evidence indicating foul play. But critics quickly highlighted problems with that theory. Phoenix left behind important belongings. She stopped communicating with everyone she knew, and there was no verified evidence showing she intentionally started a new life elsewhere. Then there was the possibility of criminal involvement. Perhaps someone convinced Phoenix to meet them. Perhaps she encountered danger after leaving home. Perhaps the abandoned vehicle represented the final known stage of a much larger crime. Yet investigators struggled to identify a suspect. No obvious person of interest emerged. No clear motive surfaced, and no physical evidence directly supported the theory. As the years passed, the mystery only deepened. Tips continued arriving. Detectives reviewed information repeatedly. Family members pushed for renewed attention, but every potential lead eventually reached the same destination: a dead end. Today, more than a decade after Phoenix Coldon disappeared, investigators still cannot explain what happened after she drove away from her family's home. The black SUV was found. Phoenix was not. And somewhere within the missing hours between those two events lies the answer to a mystery that has haunted everyone connected to the case. Some believe Phoenix chose to leave. Others believe she became the victim of circumstances nobody has yet uncovered. and some remain convinced that someone knows exactly what happened, but has never come forward. Perhaps the most unsettling aspect of the case is how ordinary it began. No dramatic confrontation, no obvious warning signs, no final message. Just a young woman leaving home on a quiet afternoon, a decision made thousands of times every day by people across the country. Yet for Phoenix Coldon, that ordinary drive became the last confirmed chapter of her known life. And until the missing hours are explained, one question will remain unanswered. What happened after Phoenix Coldon drove away? Where did she go? And why has nobody been able to find her since? More than a decade later, the mystery remains unsolved, and Phoenix Coldon remains missing.